Welcome to the Vaxa Bureau podcast, where we help leaders across critical industries over the Indo-Pacific be ready for today and prepared for tomorrow. Our mission is to provide credible intelligence, communities of practice, and secure products for leaders who are shaping the future of their organisations, their nations, and the Indo-Pacific region. Today, we're diving into a challenge that strikes at the heart of national resilience, the future of young Australian men. With welfare dependency on the rise and resilience seemingly in decline, what does this mean for our workforce, leadership pipeline, and social fabric? To help us explore this, I'm joined by Lachie Stuart, former professional rugby player, coach, speaker, and founder of the Man That Can project. Lachie's mission is simple but profound: to empower men with the tools, strategies, and community they need to live more fulfilling and purpose-driven lives. Lachie Stuart, thanks for joining me.
Toddy, mate, absolute pleasure. As I said, this is a bucket list for me. I'm very excited to have a yarn with a great mate, but also someone that I respect and is leading the way in the way that you conduct yourself. So pleasure's all mine.
Well, Lachie, mate, the pleasure is all mine. The honour's all mine. Hey, Lachie, look, before founding the Man That Can project, you're a professional rugby player. You know, you're an athlete. You know, you're in the building business. How did those years in rugby shape your identity and values and understanding of resilience?
Mm. It's a great question. And I think tying it into resilience, one of the most important things that it allowed me to be an individual, like resilient individual, but also become part of a resilient team was we had a common goal. Everyone in the club, from the people who are running water to the coaches to even our partners and family members, were all there for one reason, which was to obviously win premierships. And when you have a common goal, you think about, okay, well, how can I, or how do I need to show up in this moment to do the best for the team? And you see it all season long. People are carrying niggling injuries that maybe if we didn't have a chance of, and actually look at the NRL now, like if a team doesn't have the ability to make finals, people will just go get their shoulder worked on or their knee worked on and they'll take the rest of the season off. However, if you're playing finals or there's a chance of finals, you'll find another gear and you're like, I think I can play through this. And watching how that was done and how other men and teammates were doing that around me made me want to do that. You know, I played seasons with bad ankles and broken noses and various other things because I wanted a shot at achieving the common goal. And not only as a team, but I wanted to be on that team in those moments. And as an individual, like when you carry an injury, for example, I'm referencing that to footy, you do start proving to yourself that you're capable of more. And the compound effect of that year upon year, when you're like, wow, I can't believe I played through and played a season, a game the week after with a broken nose. And you know, not that I'd recommend that, but I had this newfound belief that like I have an ability to deal with pain. I have an ability to achieve a goal, even though there's a direct challenge in front of me. And that is so empowering. Like you cannot put your head on the pillow at night, Toddy, and not be proud of who you are going, wow. Like, and some people may say that's stupid, but in terms of achieving the goal, like, wow, I'm capable of more than I thought. I wonder what I could get out of myself next week or the week after when I'm actually a little bit healthier, a little bit more recovered. And that's where you know, it leaves that blank canvas in front of you to go, well, what can we actually achieve? And that's why you see teams in momentum where like things are going their way and they just continue to compound on that and they run away with games or they run away with a season or get into a win streak because the resilience to do the things that they're required to do, even when it's challenging, becomes easier. And so for me, to answer your question, Todd, being in that environment shaped who I was. It made me believe that I was capable of more. It made me understand that having a common goal was what would separate resilience from stupidity in terms of just putting your head down and grinding it out. And sometimes you would achieve the outcomes and other times you wouldn't, but you would come back next season with newfound lessons and you would be I guess, a more evolved version of who you were to try and build on with the next season.
And it's a great feeling personally and as a team too, right? And not it doesn't necessarily just have to be a rugby team, but even with a group of mates or people, when you've got a common goal and everyone's binding together because they're getting there. You know, they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you do play through injuries, and you do some things that you wouldn't normally do in life. Because you're not just playing for the silverware. I don't believe. I think you're playing for your teams and also yourself. Would that be a fair comment?
Exactly. Definitely, definitely so, and that's a good part, and thanks for bringing that into, like, mateship. It's so many men feel lonely even though they have a lot of mates because we're craving that growth, and, like, I believe that good mates help their other they don't allow their mates to stay stuck, and we can look at our mates, and we may see that they're in a rut. They may have just gone through a relationship breakdown, maybe they've got laid off at work, maybe they're injured in sport. And quite often we're like, "You doing alright?" And we accept that surface level, "Yeah, mate, I'm good." And that's really as far as it goes. But meanwhile, generally, the bloke is dealing with stuff underneath where he wants to connect, he wants to open up, he wants to share how he's feeling. But because we haven't built that ability to understand, "Hey, what's the common goal here?" The common goal in mateship is to have mates that support you, challenge you, and lift you up when you're down. And in order to do that, you have to be able to have challenging conversations. And that's where like resilience would tie into those conversations. Like the resilient piece is to say, mate, and I actually had this happen to me 12 years ago when I was struggling. A guy that I respected was about 10 years older than me. And he knew I was struggling. Like he saw how I was blowing myself up on the weekends after footy. And I just isolating myself from the rest of the team. And he reached out and said, mate, how are you doing? And I was like, I'm fine. And he pushed back and he's like, I don't think you are.
Mm,
And I've actually got a spare ticket to this event. I think you should come along to this event. I think it'd be awesome for you. And this was my first time going to like a Tony Robbins style event. But the fact that he pushed back and didn't accept that I wasn't doing well gave me this platform where I didn't open up immensely, but I was like, this guy can see that something's up.
yeah,
Like, people are starting to notice. And for me, life was heavy in that point, and I wasn't asking for help. But he gave me this, extended this olive branch and challenged me a little bit because he knew that I was stuck and he had this ability to help me rise. And that's what he did. He was a pivotal influence in my life.
that's fantastic, man. When you got people like that around you who actually care, that's. But Lockie, also, just quickly sticking on the rugby theme for a bit too, because in my mind, you had an extra challenge at some point in your time. You were playing professional rugby in France, which is a long
Yes.
way from home. Different
Yep.
culture, different
Yep.
language, new teammates. You know, you
Yep.
that must have been a challenge.
It was a huge challenge. And I did not understand what I was getting myself into. I wanted to play overseas at this point because I was running away from a relationship breakdown, and I thought it would be a great stepping stone to play more back in Australia. And when you go over there, I had been learning French for 6 months before I moved over. And as soon as I landed in the place, got off the plane, the team, the uh, chairman and the coach were there, and they've just started riffing off in French. They're like, "Comment ça va?" Blah 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 blah, and I've just been like, "What?" And that's when I realized that French use slang as well. They don't do the correct dialect that they teach you, and I was really overwhelmed. And then I then get a tour around the club, and I'm lucky my mum came with me, and mum was there for the first month. And then when mum went, I just had to figure it all out, and I was 21 at this point.
Mm,
And the challenging part about that is I didn't have mates over there with me. I was playing fly half and fullback where you need to speak, right? Like you have to talk a lot on the field, and they were teaching me all of the terms and the things that I had to say on the field. But when you're in the heat of battle playing footy, like your default is English. For me,
mm,
my default was
mm.
English. And so I was making mistakes and I was getting down on myself, and I had no one to turn to and no one to really who could understand what I was going through because not many people were foreigners over there and their families are back home and you feel like you're missing out on things. And it was a really, really tough time. And I didn't have the tools to be able to deal with it. So I did what I'd previously done and just drank a lot of
Mm.
booze because it was comfort. It was something that I could turn to that made me switch off for a little bit and I could just be at peace.
Yeah, I mean, that language barrier is a big one. Mate, you probably could have been a timely moment, especially if you're standing at fly half or fullback directing the play and just reminded them that who won at Waterloo. That might not have gone down so well.
No, no. Well, I wasn't that educated back then, so I didn't have much to add to the
Not
conversation.
at all, not at all. You're a very, very intelligent young man. Hey, Lockie, mate, there comes a moment, when people, they choose to change course.
Mhm.
You've had a lot of moments in your life being, pivotal moments, France is one of them, rugby's another one, a whole lot of others that we could get into and spend hours talking about, but what was the catalyst for you to create the Man That Can project?
It was having a lack. So when I returned home from France, I didn't have, my mates were finishing their trades and others were finishing their university degrees. And I looked around and I was like, I'm behind. Like, I didn't have any opportunities in Australia to play. Like, I had like Q Cup, Premier Grade, and, but that wasn't necessarily the step that I wanted. And I'm like, I'm falling behind. And so I realized that I'd only had world class mentors in the sporting space, not in any other area. And I kept making mistake after mistake, and I felt like I was the only person making these mistakes because everyone else around me looked from the outside like they were just crushing it financially. They had relationships going on. They knew what they wanted to do with their life. And in my head, I'm like, "Hey, you're a mistake. Like, you're a big failure here, and you've had opportunity." And that led me down a path where same thing. I went down the drinking and recreational drug use path to a point where I didn't wanna live. Like, I didn't feel like I had enough value. I wasn't contributing to anything, and it's not a fun place to be. And, like, that's obviously when that gentleman reached out to me and helped me start working on things. But what happened at this event that he took me to, and I took my mum. Mum was like my safety blanket as a young sort of 22, 23-year-old bloke. She was, best woman on the planet. But she came to this event with me, with Tom, who was taking me there, and when we walked into this room, Toddy, there was people jumping on chairs, high-fiving, they were hugging, and I was like, "What is this insanity? Like, this is wild." And I just remember turning to Tommy, I was like, "If anyone tries to hug me, they're gonna find out about it." But anyway, we proceeded to sit down and, throughout the day, we were learning things and people were talking about things, and there was one gentleman who shared his story, and he was a bricklayer, and now he's on stages going all around the world inspiring people that they're capable of more. I turned to my mum in that moment and I was like, I've never felt so inspired in this way outside of sport. Like, this was the first time that I actually thought my life could mean something. I just didn't know in what capacity. But I said to mum, and she always still brings this up, where I was like, I'm going to do that one day. Walked out of that event, didn't know what it was like, but it had ignited this hunger in me to see what I was capable of. So I started reading books, finding more events, um, documenting the journey on Instagram. This was 2014, so Instagram was sort of just booming. And I was sharing with people things that I was learning because any challenge that I had, whether it was like I didn't believe I was worthy of living, I wasn't a good partner, I was insecure, I would find a book or an event and I would go deal with that challenge. And then I would share, this is what I have done, this is what I wasn't proud of, this is how I've overcome it. And I started building an audience and people were asking me questions. They're like, Lockie, thanks for sharing that. Now I don't feel alone. So I'm getting validation. I'm like, this is awesome. And it's good to know that I'm not the only one experiencing this. And then women would start saying, "Hey, my partner does what you did here. Like, how do you feel that I could get them to recognize that that's something they need to improve upon?" And I kept going, interesting, interesting. And I was working as a chippy at this time. And it got to a point where I was on holidays with my now wife in Austria. And I just kept getting the same questions. And I was like, you know what? What I'm missing in my life and what a lot of people, other men seem to be missing is role models across all domains of life. Men who are successful in their career, men who are incredible fathers, men who live in really rich lifestyles, men who just have extremely strong mindsets, men who are fit and healthy. And I wanted access to that, but I also wanted to give these people access to that, other men access to that, because we miss that. And I wanted those men not only to have the credibility that they do live the life that most people want in those areas, but I wanted them to be honest. I wanted them to sit down and say, "Hey, Lachie and gentlemen, I have achieved this, but it came with this cost. It came with this sacrifice, and here's what I do differently." Or maybe if you're striving towards this, you need to be prepared for this to happen. And as we created this, the first event, Todd, um, we had 8 men. It was great, and by month 3, we had 30 men from all walks of life, like literally doctors, bricklayers, lecturers from universities, and when they walked in the room, there was no status, there was no income brackets, they were just men who were wanting to talk about challenges that they were having, and then they were also supporting and offering perspectives and insights to other men who were sharing. And they would come in feeling heavy, and they would walk out feeling like they just had this big weight taken off their back. And that for me was what led to what the Man That Can project is now, because it just initially started with me having a gap in my life and needing better mentors and truth to be able to improve my quality of life. And I knew that so many other men were desperate for that as well. They just didn't know how to get it.
Yeah, man, it's such an amazing project, and it's filling a big gap, in my mind. There's not too many, I guess, programs, facilities, groups like this that I've ever heard of, where you can do that in a safe place, and that's an amazing project, mate. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. It's changed a lot since 2017 when we started, and there's definitely a lot of incredible groups out there now doing awesome work, which is so good to see, because I think every man out there, like the beautiful thing, one beautiful thing about the internet is we're now seeing that there is options and there's opportunities for us to work on things outside of the norm. And a lot of men it's really changing their life just being in an environment where you're around men who are talking about relationships or talking about what it's like having a young family or what it's like dealing with financial pressure, and for them to realize and recognize that, hey, this is normal. Like this is just part of the journey of life.
Mm,
Like I'm not broken. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm just in this challenging period, and I now get a choice. I get a choice to allow that challenging period to define me, or I can take the path of resistance where I start growing into a better version of myself who can, overcome this challenge.
yeah, and it's just so important, I think, you know, being able to discuss that with other men. I mean, a couple of mornings a week when time allows, I'll go and train at Brothers Rugby Club with a group of anywhere between 5 and 10 men from different backgrounds. But, you've got former Wallabies, you've got extremely successful business people, you've got builders, you've got everyone that's in the cohort that you were just talking about. And you train as hard or not as hard as you like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But then everyone goes and has a coffee after it. And that's
I love
20 minutes, maybe, some might hang around longer, where you're having those chats. And I must say, mate, the feeling is it's euphoric almost. And it's all positive conversation. It's all about lifting each other up. And it's not a kumbaya, light a campfire, get the guitar out sort of stuff. And it's not
Yeah.
scripted. It's just, how if someone's feeling a bit down or whatnot. So, a bit of a pat in the back. You're right, mate. I tell you what, it is powerful.
It's so important. And I was reading a study last week that obviously, 1 in 4 men are feeling lonely and isolated, and it's just as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Mm.
But the recommendation is that men need to catch up with their mates twice a week.
Mm.
Now, women generally can just like go sit down with for a coffee and just talk about it. Men, not so much. We need to do something to share, like whether it's golf or watch some sport, or as you said, go to a 20-minute training session first so that we can build that rapport and learn to open up, because when you share something, it's like the rapport's been established. Now I feel I can open up.
Mate, it's huge.
A
And I did a walk recently, Lockie, with, 7 other men across Hadrian's Wall, which is on the border of England and Scotland. So it's 6-day walk, 180 Ks or something like that. Oh,
Savage.
mate, well, but being able to talk to other men and just and people in general, right? And, in that environment as well, there's no pressure. But, mate, 6 days and 180 kilometers is nothing, right? So, Lockie, you recently ran 58 marathons in 58 days across the United States, across Australia. This is after having rode, you know, mar 30 marathons straight on an ergo, you crazy, crazy man. Um, eh to
Guilt.
raise awareness for mental health, right? Now that's staggering. That's a staggering physical and mental and logistical feat.
Mm.
Mate, tell me, what did that challenge teach you about resilience and what's possible when men lean into both vulnerability and strength?
It can change everything, like, I truly believe walking away from that, we are, and it's so cliche to say, but we are capable of so much more than we thought. Like, I walked away I started that not thinking it was possible, like, 18 months ago when I started training for it. By the time I hit the start line, I was like, "This is already done." Now that I've completed it, I'm like, "What else am I capable of?" And it's so interesting to me that I can say that out loud when, 18 months ago, it was not possible. And what that taught me about resilience is this, and I believe it to be the resilience loop, because people constantly ask me, "Lucky, how do I improve my resilience? You're so resilient to be able to do that." And resilience has to be task or outcome specific, because my wife said it to me and she said it very bluntly, and she's an incredible woman. And just this was one of the most ben- interesting things she's ever said. But she said, if you don't have a goal to push towards and you're just putting your head down and grinding out, showing up every day and working hard and nothing's changing, like that's just stupid. But if you're doing it towards something that's going to improve your life, that's where resilience comes in, because you have to do the thing that you don't feel like doing or is uncomfortable to do in that moment consistently over a long period of time to deliver that outcome. So for me with the run, it was a part of something bigger. For me, the run, like, I'm not defined by 58 marathons. It was something that, 1, would allow me to see what I'm capable of. 2, would allows me to raise funds and awareness for something that's super important to me, which is mental health. And 3, it would improve and grow my platform to continue doing the work that I'm doing with the Man That Can project. So there was a number of reasons and a number of outcomes that I was working towards there. So in moments when I was getting rejected by sponsors, in moments where I got injured on day one, in moments where I had to learn to ask for help, and more importantly, I had to learn to accept help. I did it anyway because I knew that the outcome was more important than what I was dealing with in that moment. And to me, that moves us to point 2 of the resilience loop. So point 1 is you got to have that North Star. You've got to have that goal that you're working towards. Point 2 is a choice, right? The sliding door moments or the fork in the road moments. When you have a choice, you're gonna I have choices where they're all good, right? It's like, this is overwhelming because every choice could be great. And then you'll have moments where there's a clear winner and there's a clear loser in that choice. And then you'll have choices which I was faced with most days on that 58 marathons where they all sucked. But out of all of those choices, one was gonna move me closer to the goal and one was gonna move me further away from the goal. And I remember on day 5, I got injured on day 1, and day 5, I was at the point where both of my ankles were size of the golf balls. My shins were inflamed, and it looked like I had cankles, and every step was just burning up my shins. And I'm walking around in minus 12 degrees trying to finish a marathon. And you can imagine the thoughts that are going through my head, like, "Who are you to think you could do this? Who are you to think you can raise this money? You may as well quit." Like, and choice 1 was, if I quit now, I'm gonna get back in the van, I'll put my feet up, the pain will go away, I'll warm up, and I'll feel good. But the unfortunate thing about choices, which most people don't consider, Todd, is that they have friends, and those friends are consequences. And so I was fortunate enough to think, hey, what are the consequences if I quit? Well, consequence number 1 is I wouldn't raise the funds for mental health. That is not cool. 2, I would let down the sponsors and everyone who's believed in me and supported me for the last 12 months. Didn't like that. And most importantly, when I put my head on the pillow at night, I would not have been proud of the man that I'd become. So I thought about that and I was like, okay, let's quickly look at option 2. Option 2 was I continue walking, freezing my ass off. Every step's extremely painful, and I don't know whether I've got stress fractures or not. But the friends or the consequences that are attached to that was I would have the opportunity, not guaranteed, but I would have the opportunity to hit the fundraising goal. I would have the opportunity to continue inspiring people to prove to themselves that they're capable of more than they thought. Most importantly, when I put my head on the pillow that night, I would have been so proud of the man that I'd become. And I loved those consequences. So I hated both options, but I loved those consequences more. And so I continued to move. And that for me is those sliding door moments in resilience. You don't always have to like the options, but one definitely is going to move you closer to the man that you want to become, the life that you want to build, or the goal that you want to achieve. And finally, the third part in that resilience loop is stacking small wins, right? Stacking small wins, quite often we think we have to hit a home run when in reality is like that can be quite overwhelming. There's a lot of pressure. And when we feel pressure, sometimes we aren't resilient enough to deal with that. So we just don't do anything or we quit. So what I recommend and what my mate Etienne, who's a psychologist who was with us, he just said, mate, let's just break this down. What do you think you can run today? And I said to Etienne, I like, realistically, I could probably run 300 meters. And then the pain's just overwhelming. And he's like, brilliant. And I was like, what do you mean brilliant? Like I still got 41.9 kilometers. And he's like, no, 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 no. We're going to walk 300 meters. Then we're going to run 300 meters and then we'll walk a kilometer. And then we'll just continue until you complete that. And in that moment, that's where I realized I'd been thinking I was better than I was in that moment. Right? I wasn't as healthy as I was when I started. So I had to, change my line of sight down to a point that was manageable. And that then enabled me to focus on just that next step. And then once I got to the walk period, I was like, oh, how good the pain can ease up for a little bit. We'll walk for a kilometer and then I've got to build up to take that next step. And that was such a powerful thing because that choice slowly chipped away at me achieving the outcome. And that's the outcome that everyone goes, Lachie, you're so resilient. How did you complete that marathon? How did you complete the next 53 where you were injured? And it started with a choice and stacking the small wins. It didn't need to be more complicated than that.
That's such a great methodology and way to approach life. And Lachie, I remember seeing some vision when you were giving a keynote speech a couple of weeks ago, and there was of that moment when Etienne's walking alongside with you, and you're telling the story about. And I'm just thinking, that's crazy. Where's that warm? Give me the warm van. Give me the hot chocolate. Because 99% of people in that room were thinking the same. Thinking that's but what a way to break things down around, you've identified those vulnerabilities, there's inner strength, but the key thing for me was the people around you as well. Not your internal fortitude's number one, but having mates around you to go, you can do this, buddy, and here's how we're going to do it. Problem solving, getting on with it.
It goes back to what I said at the beginning, like with mates, like I had a lot of people put their hand up to say, yeah, I'd love to come crew you for sure. But I already knew that there's mates and then there's acquaintances, and
Yeah.
on something like this that was gonna be so significant, and I'm saying that not to discredit acquaintances, but when you're trying to do something significant in your life, and for anyone listening, like, think about what your 58 marathon would be, and it doesn't need to be physical, it could be starting a business, it could be leaving a job, maybe even leaving a relationship or starting a relationship where there's all of those feelings going around it, the doubt, the fear, there's a lot of work to be done. All of that was happening, but I knew there was a very select few of people who knew me well enough to understand how I would be on this trip. Like I was going to be depleted, I was going to be moody. I shut down, like I don't talk much when I'm in pain, and I knew these guys who ended up coming on with me knew that, and they also knew that the most important thing of being around me when I'm doing something like this is a state of conviction, and that means you either believe or you leave. And these guys got it. These like Ben, our videographer, he's one of my great mates, and he said the hardest thing for him on this trip was seeing me in pain every day, wanting to, comfort me, but all he was there to do was to jam a camera in my face. And so having the guys who were so selfless, like they left behind their families, so much going on in their life to support me on this dream. And I would not, it does not matter how resilient I am, that I can tell you right now, I would not have finished this without them.
Yeah, no, that's huge. But I saw another fellow recently at another function. He had nothing on you though, mate. He only ran around the world. Tim Franklin, oft.
He's a weapon, Timmy. I love Timmy.
It's the first time I'd seen him, but his whole story was just ridiculous. For someone who physically should not have been able to do it, to going, I'm going. But he told a part of the story he told was a mate of a mate joined him on the logistics campaign. 200 days he went along with Tim. He'd never met him in his life. He gave up
I love
200
that.
days of his own life to sup and when asked why, he's gone, "Well, a mate asked me to, and that's what mates do."
Oh, I
It
love
was
that.
huge, mate. It literally puts, goosebumps on your skin.
That is mateship, like, it's inconvenient, like, I think use Are You Okay Day, for example, like, it's obviously a day for awareness, but friendship and building rapport to the point where a mate will confide in you isn't convenient.
Mm.
Like, everyone's got so much going on in their life, so to hear that what you just mentioned there, where a guy took 200 days out of his life for someone that he didn't even know is the definition of mateship.
That's God tier status, that, mate. That's God tier.
Oh, that is the ultimate. He owes him a few beers, that's for sure. Bloody hell.
Lock, I mean, obviously yourself and people in your team, not just on the runs, not just on the rows, but in life, that helps build the resilience. It helps build identity. And it's something that, I'm noticing, as a business owner, as a father, just as a, someone in the community about what's going on in the region at the moment. With those aspects in life, especially in men, like your resilience and identity. We're
Yeah.
seeing there's a lot of change happening in the region, culturally. Yeah, but we're seeing in Australia alone, 1 in 4 men are receiving government welfare support. In developed, Indo-Pacific nations like New Zealand, Japan, Korea, up to 25% of working age men are receiving some form of welfare. Then you've got developing Indo-Pac nations like Fiji, Samoa, PNG, where they've got informal support, in place. Government programs exist, but male unemployment and disability reliance is rising highly. India, 50% of households are receiving some form of benefit. How does reliance on real or perceived government support impact young men's sense of identity and capability?
It's an interesting one to look at, right? And so even if we look at like welfare, we obviously everyone needs to be made aware that there's various reasons for that, ranging from obviously unemployment to disability to health conditions to homelessness. And so there's going to be varying levels of assistance needed. But if I'm looking at specifically young men, and they're using it just for the fact that maybe they don't have a career yet, I would bring it back to even for myself when I was looking to start my first business and I didn't have the financial support to do that. And I'm so grateful my mum loaned me 500 bucks and I've still got this little dodgy contract I wrote to pay her back and she owned 10% of everything that I did. Um, but if it's done well to the point where we're assisting you right now, but we want to help you continue to deliver the skill, like develop your skills and a sense of who you want to become and how you want to contribute, whether initially it's for your immediate family and community to then the larger part of society, then that is great. But what it can also be doing for various elements of that is they're relying on government support and welfare, but they're as a part of that, they're losing confidence and they're losing identity because they're not developing skills. They're not getting out there and I guess making mistakes and learning how to problem solve or critically think and work out and take those experiences to go, hey, I've just had 5 different experiences over the last 3 months in terms of my career and where I feel I find meaning, where I feel I can add value to the community or just even to workplaces. Use that feedback to gain more clarity around who I am as an individual. And because people can go through that rotation without that feedback, we're becoming more dependent. We're losing sense of self. We're losing confidence in our ability to create anything and or lead anything. So what would you do in that situation? I know for myself, even firsthand, it's like I want to escape that. I don't want to deal with that. That's a tough piece of self-reflection. And what worries me about that is we're losing men in the community who have strong leadership values. They have, more importantly, a level of self esteem where they believe they are capable of dealing with all of life's adversities because we're not getting through life without adversity. Part of growth or creating something great means you're signing a contract to face problems and adversity. And when you have people who aren't being challenged to grow and it's like find out who you are, you're going to become so dependent on that, I guess, welfare system that we're, finding gaps in society where people just don't have those strong role models and there's no direct path out. And I think if we were to throw, rites of passage in and how do we make young boys into men? That's when you're teaching them those skills, and we don't have that set up in society anymore. We just go like, "You're 18 now, you're considered a man,"
Mm.
and most people might have been sitting at home playing video games for the last 18 years, and they don't understand how to change a tire or how to communicate with people or how to deal with critical feedback, and we take everything so personally that once again, the safest place for me is sitting inside the house. It's retreating rather than going, "Okay, that's tough to hear, but I know that the goal for me is to contribute and be able to support a family or be able to contribute to the workforce or to my family or to even to this country, that I wanna take that on and I wanna work through that." Meaning I need to understand that most things aren't personal. I need to understand that it's okay to not have it all figured out. It's okay to not have all the skills that I need to develop, but I just need to keep showing up day in, day out to do that.
Mm. Yeah. So like, what role do you think dependency plays in shaping or suppressing, resilience and ambition?
Dependency to me is where there's no agency, there's no ownership. And a sense of ownership doesn't mean that you need to go out and start your own business. It's just across life. Like a great model, for example, is people talk about the traditional stereotypical model of we go to school, we get good grades, we go to university, we start the family, we buy the house, and we do that. And I would never condemn that because I think that's an awesome place to start because what it is still encouraging is growth and is responsibility. Meaning you have to become the person who gets good grades or completes your trade. You have to become the person who can support a family. You have to become the person who can afford to buy a mortgage in this insane market. So there is merit to that. But what I think we're seeing is there's a lot of unhappy people out there because one definition of success cannot service the Australian population of 24, 25 million people. We need to start redefining what success looks like for the individual. And if we were to, and going back to the resilience loop, people are going to be more resilient if they have bought into the idea of success that's in front of them. I can promise you, Todd, if I was still, and this is nothing against being a tradesman because it just wasn't for me, but if I was still working as a tradesman, would I be as resilient in things? Probably not, because I didn't like the profession. I didn't see it being able to service the kind of life that I wanted. And therefore, I'm not going to work harder to do more of the same thing. And so when we're looking at how do we build more resilient men, whether it's just to become better fathers, better employers or employees, we need to sit down with them and just say, okay, what do you want from this? Because for some people rocking up at work, and I know we're sort of jumping age groups here, but they could be rocking up to work and their intention of being in this job or in this role might be just to collect a
Yeah.
paycheck and then they just want to go home with their family. And that is
Mm.
okay. We just need to be aware of it. We need to have these conversations. Other people might rock up in the workplace because they really want to progress their career and they see this as the vehicle to do that. Other people are rocking up at work because they just love the culture and the work environment. And then there's people who are just there to learn the skills and then they're going to eventually go out and do their own
Mm.
thing. And all of them are okay. But to get the most out of your people, and if we were talking about developing people, my belief is I need to sit down with Jenny or I need to sit down with John and say, hey, what how can we best serve you while you're working for us? What do you want out of here? Do you just want to collect the paycheck? And there's no judgment. We just need to know because if I can say, hey, Jenny has said she wants to progress her career here, we can then start setting goals that really drive her. Because if you think about a workplace like, I don't know, like Google or Facebook, and you always hear those, or Uber, like all these stories of people like sleeping on the couch and working 18-hour days, even just as staff members. Why does that happen? That is a level of resilience that most people wouldn't show.
Mm.
But it happens because they've bought into the vision, they've bought into the North Star, so therefore their choices are to do
Yeah.
whatever it takes to get this off the ground, and the small wins that the small steps that they take is like, "I'm gonna work for as long as I can, I'm gonna sleep under my desk, and I'm gonna go again."
Mm.
And so if we can help people employee, all of those roles, find out what their North Star is in the thing that they're doing, they're gonna be excited by the opportunities ahead of them, and they will improve their resilience because they're gonna constantly go to themselves, "Is this gonna move me towards my goal, or is this gonna move me away from my goal?"
And, Lockie, I don't know what you're seeing, but and maybe this is a generalisation, but talking with some small business owners and people in the local community with, businesses who do unsexy things, right? But need to be done. Can't get anyone to work, can't get anyone to turn up. They call in sick the last minute. You know, is there a point that, you know, whether it's driven by social media or whether it's driven by government handouts, especially after COVID or during COVID, that people go, well, I don't need to work hard because I'm going to be an influencer and I'm going to earn $100 million a week
Yeah.
by doing this,
Yeah.
or I don't need to go to work for those 8 hours a day for minimum wage, which is still a good wage, because I
Mm.
can just sit at home and get money from the government. Um,
Yeah.
and that does no one any good. I came from a background of housing commission, unfortunately, and mother on a pension, and it was first cycle, and I was determined to get out of it, and she was determined for me to get out of it as well, because all of our neighbours were third or fourth generation, sitting at home drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes all day. But I knew that I had to start at the bottom, and that meant, from the age of 13, working 3 jobs after school, packing shelves, cleaning a butcher shop, cleaning a bakery, working in a fruit shop, learning hard work. I watched my mother, clean houses, to make ends meet, working, working, working. And it's not all about manual labor and just working hard and long hours. It's also about that guidance. And I was lucky enough to have a few male influences in my life that picked me up and said, "Come on, mate, we're going on this journey." Um, and Eh, and that was extremely important 'cause, my father wasn't in the house. So, it was very, very important to have someone believe and belong in you and go, "Mate, come on, we're gonna go here." And just check in every now and again, or give you that opportunity for that first job, which, you know, m a lot of kids aren't getting the first opportunity for that job because they don't have experience.
Mm. It's so true, and look, to be honest, like, uh, it's such a big question, and there's so many ways to dissect this one because I would imagine, social media has been beneficial, but everything has pros and cons, and every individual receives those in different ways. But I would, look at social media, for example, where every second post is like you can, and I'm probably guilty of this but I do believe this. You can literally be doing have whatever you want, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of sacrifice, and you have to develop the skills. You have to really understand things on a deep level, and you have to become the kind of person that can deal with the responsibility that it takes to have the success that the individual wants. And so, if I'm a young fella coming out and you're seeing, a mate blow up on TikTok or something like that, you're like, oh, I know him, and like he didn't do anything special. I can definitely do that. I just got to do what he did.
Mm,
But there's obviously a lot of variables that are out of our control as well, and people are going through trying to skip, take a big leap without doing the hard work. And if we look at anything that works fundamentally, if you look at generating wealth, if you look at remaining fit and healthy, if you look at a great marriage, like it's all built off daily deposits, and there's fundamentals. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors around the outside always because people like selling quick fixes, and we know that people will buy quick fixes because that's how the human brain
mm,
works. We want safety and we want ease, but that in itself is the trap. And so for individuals, we can't, unfortunately, I don't believe, fix people, or we can't control people and tell them what to do. If a young kid wants to walk that path and believes he's going to be an influencer, or believes that they don't have to do those shit jobs, the only person that they're harming is
mm,
himself. What we need to do as I guess, the older generation who see things a little bit differently and maybe have a problem with that. And I was sharing this with you offline before because someone challenged me on that.
mm,
They're like, okay, well, as someone who believes there's a problem and we have an idea of how to fix it, what am I actually doing? And this is what this dude said to me. And I was like, fair point. Like, very good point. And one thing that I think is important is how we're going to find ways to give people the opportunity to understand the value of, like putting the work in with things, like not becoming this overnight success. But if by the time you're 35, you have the emotional regulation, you have the self awareness, you have developed some key critical skills that will allow you to live an incredible life, and your definition of incredible is this, then would that be worth it? And most people at a young age would say no, because I'm only 18, in another 15 years, that's nearly double my life. But the years are gonna go by anyway, so why not develop skills while still having a crack at your side hustle or whatever it is? But I guess to circle it back around to the people who are struggling with good young staff and getting them to work or show up, that's a character problem. An individual with good character knows that even if I'm gonna call in last minute, that's probably not the best thing to do. And so that comes back to, like, in my opinion, parenting.
Mm,
How do we look up, even in sports clubs? Because not everyone's fortunate to have great
mm,
parents. But if they're in a sports club or any social club, like, we have the ability to influence, and I know you've read Steve Biddulph's
mm,
work, Raising Boys, Raising Girls, A New Manhood. That book made me cry, like, incredible. But kids get to an age where they don't care about their parents in terms of, "I'm not listening to you. I wanna look for people outside of the household who I can learn
mm.
from," role models. So I then start thinking, how can we get more positive role models that can start influencing from a young age around, like, it would be hard to do what you did as a kid or what I did as a kid, where my dad could just take me on the job site. Now with workplace health and
Mm,
safety, like, it's not possible to give. And for me, I got a taste of that and I was like, I see my dad working hard. Like, I wanna work hard. I see him do the long hours. I see what it's like on the job site when he's talking to people, he's putting up trusses, roofing houses. Like, I saw that.
mm.
Whereas now we're not getting to see a lot of these things. We're just seeing the end result.
Yeah, that's right. It's that journey. So I sort of liken it a bit to coaching, junior rugby and junior cricket. As you mentioned, there's an opportunity there to help shape young people in a different environment. And it's often the message versus the messenger. So mum or dad could be telling you something like, "Here's how you play a cover drive," or "Here's how you tackle." But if Coach Lachie or Coach Todd shows you, "Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic. I wish I'd known that." Yet mum and dad, they go, "I've been bloody well trying to teach you that for ages. You're not listening."
Ever,
But
yeah.
it's that message versus the messenger, and I think young people, young men especially, benefit a lot from that. Um,
Well, imagine, like, think about this, right? People do birthday parties for their children, a day of celebration for them being born. But why aren't dads or parents getting together and saying, "Hey, we want to develop some great characteristics in our children. We're looking at honesty. We're looking at the ability to deal with pressure. We're looking at the ability to be accommodating of other people's values and beliefs. Why don't we put on a 3-day event where we bring someone in for our children and they get that
mm,
experience? Like, it's like a little camp.
it's a good idea.
If people are really starting to try and make change, obviously the best time to influence children, people, is when we're younger, before we start adopting all of these other values and beliefs. And we spend money. Like, I see people spend all kinds of money on crap for their kids, and I'm like, well, there's other things that you could do that would really shape who they're going to become. And that then, you have a kid who goes through school who's been exposed to, seeing what life could be like if you don't grow up with great parents, or seeing what life looks like if you experience homelessness. Like, you're starting to give them a level of awareness. And when you bring a level of awareness, you start bringing in a level of acceptance, right? Which brings empathy and other great characteristics, but it could also inspire them to go, hey, my life, I don't want to end up in that position, and I want to help other people in that position. So I'm going to work hard. Like, that's going to drive me. Like, you think about anyone who's done anything brilliant that people follow on social media, they've come from a place of pain more often than not.
Yeah, and it's inspiring too, isn't it, right? I think people, and again, people wanna believe and belong in something, think, "Oh, yeah, that's something I can do, and, by the way, I think I can do it in 1 week." Well, no, hang on, this has been someone's life journey. It's taken this bloke
Yeah.
or this lady, 20 years to do this, but mate, it's interesting 'cause you're talking about a thriving community here, right? Um, and you've built one of over 1,300 men who they share stories and tools. And what you've just suggested then is a wonderful idea. I think that's fantastic. I wish I hadn't wasted all the money on clowns and people who dress up as Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yeah. We're onto a new business model here.
Well, I think you're right, mate. I think there's some different these are different types of superheroes. And I think that's a bloody good idea. But mate, look, in your community and in your work over the last number of years, could you share a standout example where your community support, similar to what you've just spoken about, the concept you've spoken about, but community support having elevated resilience, in a way, like an individual effort couldn't.
Yeah, definitely. I'll give you a very good example. So there was a gentleman who'd been a part of our group since about 2019, end of 2019, and he was 48 at the time. Incredible dude. Like, I got a lot of respect for him, but he was very quiet. But when he started talking, he was super switched on, super intelligent, and had heaps of great ideas. When I actually went to do the 30 rowing marathons, he started pulling up every day, just pulled up a rower next to me, and he would just row 5Ks. Like, he wasn't the fitness level that he wanted to be, but he was like, "I'm just gonna do 5K a day." That's his little challenge for himself. And he started inspiring the rest of the community because no one expected him to do this. Especially one, like, people took into account his age, the stress of his job, and where his current health was at. But he kept showing up, kept doing it. And then by week 3, he's starting to do like 10K, 15K. And at the end of my 30 marathons, he rode a half marathon and sorry, 2 half marathons and a full. And you could not get the smile off this guy's face. And it wasn't the fact that he'd done that, it was he'd proven to himself that he was capable of more. And what that then has led to since then, he's left his job in a job that put a lot of stress and pressure on him. And this is where the community really came in. There's so many incredible men in our community, people who have great lives, are really good with business, really good with finances, really connected. And he was able to, on one call one week, he's just like, I think I want to, I could do this myself. I could consult myself to these mining industries and I could do quite well. And everyone's like, okay, well, why don't you?
Mm.
And he's like, "Oh, I just wouldn't know where to start." Like, but he had that newfound level of confidence where he was able to share that with the group off the back of the row. And what then happened was, like, guys were calling him outside of the group call who were in the industry and had just done startups and were giving him advice and helping him get started to the point where last year he just went full time in his own business and he's earning more in his business, has a more flexible lifestyle, less stressed, has the ability to spend time with his wife, all because of the skill sets of the group. Like, I'm not standing here saying I'm the guru and all that because I'm definitely not. But watching how the group supported him because they saw he was having a crack was one of the most incredible things I've ever seen.
How amazing. How amazing. That's fantastic. What a great feeling though too for that fellow. Like you said, if he couldn't get
Mate,
his
literally life changing. And I see that happen all the time in varying, I guess, levels of importance to people, but even if it's just getting some blokes to come run the stairs with
Mm.
us or we have guys when I was doing the 58 marathons, there's people in Ireland, and his 58-day goal was doing, obviously an ice bath, but with him, that was just jumping in the ocean. But then he was building his own community over there, and people are like, "Why on earth are you doing that?"
Mm.
And it's not just about the consistency, it's in the community that you build, and the community that he was creating was, more men just going like, "Maybe we should question what our reality is and what is considered normal," because if you live the same day on repeat, life gets very boring.
Mm.
And it's why midlife crises happen because when you do the same thing, you're like, "Is this all?"
Yeah.
Like, yeah, maybe I'm successful on paper,
Mm.
but I still feel unfulfilled, and it's not until you get to speak to different people who are doing different things and it challenges you,
Mm.
right? It challenges the way that you think. It challenges what you think is possible to the point where you'll lie awake in bed at night going, "Oh, if Johnny's doing it, why couldn't I do something a little bit differently? I've always wanted to do that. Why not me?" And then that's when that whole thing starts. You see other people taking risks and you're like, "Wow, that's inspiring. I'm gonna do it. It's time for me to do it."
Everyone's gotta have that moment once in life, surely, at least.
Exactly.
So Lockie, so in your mind, what do you think? Yeah, let's move our attention to national implications and the strategic insight about what you've been doing, what you're currently doing. what do you think with the young men you've been working with, over the years? What do you think the future leadership pipeline looks like here in Australia?
I think I'm hoping that if we can get more people in positions of influence, and that's from government to workplaces to communities to schools, to start offering and inviting opportunities for people who don't have them to get involved, to start springboarding the to start that cycle where people go, wow, firstly, I've been seen, someone values me, and I've been offered the opportunity to develop as an individual, then that's only going to compound over time. I think it, you know, if I'm looking at like how do we get that happening because wages are so high, um, obviously depending on the job market, like at the moment, there's still a lot of opportunity for people. It's just that we're thinking that working at McDonald's is not a stepping stone for creating a life when in fact it is because you learn customer service, you learn to be a part of a team, you learn to show up on time, you learn to check out, you learn to present yourself well. If we can start shaping that you don't hit your home run out of the back off the first swing, and if you have more of these leaders sharing what it actually took for them to get there publicly, it makes everyone understand that this isn't overnight success. Like this is what it's going to really take. These are some potential skills, and there's a time frame with that, and there has to be trial and error. So I'm hoping that we find a way to bring younger people into the workforce even earlier, because I think you know you can get your first job, assuming it's still the same from 14 or whatever it was, 14 and 9 months, and a lot of people still don't get their children to work. And for me, I believe you're missing out on great opportunity to start developing those skills, the things that I mentioned before, even having to, communicate with other adults or other people. And that is only going to compound because when you feel confident and comfortable doing one thing, by the time you leave school, you understand that there's standards, there are things that, structures in place in order to help you be successful.
Yeah, and then like you said, like, it takes, a lot of different levels of people in our community to help make this happen, and, you're someone who's been shaping men towards leadership and purpose, and you've just highlighted that, governments, business, and civic leaders, they need to invest in resilience, not just as a social good, but as a strategic imperative. So do you think it's education? Is it about, you know, is it about look and learn for young men to see what other people are striving towards, whether it is working at McDonald's, whether because mate, someone's got to cut the meat, someone's got to clean the toilets. We've been a society of importing labour. Used to be traditionally cheap labour to do those jobs because we didn't want to, but now it's not. Now it's minimum wages. It doesn't matter. It's
Yeah,
extremely high, and so that cost is not like it used to be. But it's also about driving that purpose. We've had this thing in our society for a number of years. Is, oh, we don't want foreigners taking our jobs. Well, you're not doing the job, mate. You get out and actually
exactly.
do it. And by the way, it's not a slight on foreigners by any means. We wouldn't have built this country without immigration.
Exactly.
Um, so mate, I don't know what the answer is. And I don't think it can be fixed overnight.
I think it's a combination of all of the things you just said. Like education has been so important to me. Like to understand things. When you understand things, you feel more confident to take action, right? To take risks. I think that's important. And that has to start with the individual. We've got a schooling system that teaches us about so many things from math to science to biology to everything, but we don't ever have any classes where we're focusing on who we are as individuals. Why do I feel this way? Why are my emotions this way? Because emotional mismanagement is huge for young men. Huge. When are we ever getting educated on that? And that can lead to a lot of bad decisions. We don't ever talk about, hey, what could your life look like if you didn't feel like you fit into the role of going to university or doing a trade? Because anyone from my experience going through, if you don't fit in there, it's like, I'm doomed. Like I'm not really here for anything. So I think education is so important because if you were to ask a young kid, like, what do you really want to do? Like it's always play based. It always is because we want to have a great life. Like we want to have a fun life. And life should be fun. We've just made work such a staple, and obviously you need money, but it becomes the whole identity of the individual rather than going, how could I make work play and how could I learn skills that are going to make me be able to do that? So I think education is extremely important, but also starting with education of individuals. So understanding how to set goals and what you could create for your life, how people think, how people manage their mental health, all of that. Like there should be just conversations. It should be story based. And then the live and learn is so important as well because it's very easy if we just focus on frameworks and stories, everyone would be healthy, wealthy, and happy. But the reason why people aren't is because they don't believe in at their core that they can do the thing. The fear of judgment, the fear of getting things wrong, the fear of failure like holds people back. So if you can put people in a position where they can just start trying things, like for me, coming back from France, Todd, the reason why I felt comfortable going to get a trade because I'd grown up going to job sites with dad. Like I knew all the slang and the terminology. So to go as a mature based apprentice, even though there was people who were younger than me, I was like, I still understand a fair bit. So I feel comfortable. And so if we can give those opportunities for people from a young age where they just like have a great skill set, they're going to be more competent because people's self-esteem is built off how many things they feel confident in. And what is confidence? Confidence is your ability to do specific tasks. So I feel confident in podcasting because I do it all the time. I feel confident in teaching because I do it all the time. I feel confident in running men's retreats because I do it all the time. There's plenty of things that I don't feel confident in because I have never lived and learned that. I've never had that experience. But I've got enough things where I feel confident that I have a great level of self-esteem and meaning I view myself in a good light.
Yeah, and that's important, to have that self-belief too. I think, and sometimes you need someone to give you that little kickstart and that reason to believe in yourself too. Hey, Lockie, mate, if you could speak directly to to young men who are listening now and men who might feel stuck, dependent, or powerless, what's the one message you want them to take away from this conversation?
I think the one thing would be that you're not broken, you're just undertrained, right? If we can start with an honest audit, meaning where am I currently at in my life? What is one thing that I could do, like one daily deposit that could start improving that area of my life, whether it's health or uh, mental health or relationships? And what's one conversation you could be having? There are so many people and so much lived experience of incredible people. Who could you take to pick their brain for a price of a cup of coffee that is going to transform your life? And understand that mood follows motion. That's why exercising is so important. And confidence will follow keeping your promises, and capability stacks from that.
Yeah, that's a great message, mate. That's a great message. And mate, what about, for Vaxa Bureau audience of leaders in government, business, and community? What's one practical action they can take today to invest in the resilience of young men and in doing so strengthen the future capability of their organisation and the nation?
Audit your staff. And what I mean by that is like find out what they want. What is their reason for coming to work every day? Because it's going to be vastly different. And when you understand what people are trying to achieve by being there, you can understand obviously what motivates them and how to make them feel valued, seen, and heard. And when you have staff that feel valued, seen, and heard, they're going to be the people. I'm not saying they should do this, but they're going to be the people who would sleep under their desk to help the company get to where it wants to get to because they feel like they're genuinely a part of that mission. Because Todd has asked me what is important to me, and he makes me feel like that's important, and it should be.
Wow, mate, that's wonderful, buddy. That is great advice. Great advice. Lockie, I want to thank you today for your candor and your insights. You've shown us that resilience isn't just a personal trait, but it's a national asset. And if young men are strong and purposeful and prepared, then Australia and indeed the Indo-Pacific will be stronger and more prepared too. So for everyone listening today, they can learn more about the Man That Can project at themanthatcanproject.com.
Yep, that's
what
correct.
about any other social media handles, mate?
No, it's all over there. It's easy to find in one place. But one thing that I think's great on there, when you go on there, there's a free scorecard, which is a 7-domain scorecard, which helps you audit those areas of life to see where you're maybe drifting and where you're thriving, because many people, as I have said multiple times, feel successful on paper, but they're still feeling that unfulfillment, and quite often it's because different areas of your life are drifting.
It's great advice.